oh, we're gonna have a resurgence of like measles or mumps or polio. What would you say to that?
Somebody says, but what about polio? I know they have never truly looked at any research. That is just a dead giveaway because a lot of polio was not actually polio.
We know within the medical system, like you're geriatric after, what is it, 35? 35,
so I've had 3 geriatric pregnancies.
Yeah, so most of your children have been geriatric pregnancies.
Yeah. I'm not a home birther who thinks everybody should home birth.
Yeah.
I think everybody should look into it. I had been the one going down to the ER when we had Sid's deaths, just kind of seeing, okay, what are the demographics? It was like at 4 and 6 months right after our well visit. The risk of the MMR has much higher risk than the risk of measles. The side effect of MMR is brain swelling, is encephalitis, and that's one of the highest ones correlated to SIDS.
It's
amazing. A half a day of education on that, and it goes over the schedule.
There does tend to be this kind of strain of like, oh, Dr. Google, like they don't want you Googling things or researching things.
ER doctors Google.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's podcast episode. I am so excited to be accompanied by my friend, Christy. Welcome to the channel, Christy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so I'm just excited in general to have this conversation because I've known for a while since I met her that she's not only just an incredible person, but she's someone that I wanted to amplify her voice to you guys because I feel like her story, her perspective, her journey is something that will encourage a lot of you, hopefully, in your story and your journey, because she has a lot of wisdom to share. And she's really helped guide me through my pregnancies and just in this transitional season in life in general. So she was saying she's a little nervous because she hasn't done an interview ever, but you know, I'm a little nervous too because I got my 3 camera setup going, so feeling very professional. Christy is a social worker and she works in a hospital here in North Idaho, and she has worked in the hospital system for 17 years now. And what is so interesting about her, besides the fact that she's been in the system for 17 years, is that she is very conservative. She is a home birther. She has birthed all 5 of her children at home. She is essentially, do you take the phrase anti-vax?
I wear it proudly.
There you go. She is a proud anti-vaxxer. She's a homeschooler. And what is really interesting also about Christy birthing her 5 children is she essentially couldn't get pregnant in her early 20s. And so that's a part of the conversation I want to have too, because I feel like on the internet, there's a lot of conversation around like being too old to have babies. Oh, you're too old now to have babies. And you are proof of the exact opposite.
Yes.
So, Christy, I guess we'll just start, we're gonna start with your health journey.
Okay.
What set you on your health, like what was the first thing that started getting you going on your health journey?
Oh goodness. So I will say in my early 20s, I thought I was healthy. I was eating, whole wheat bread. I was still making things at home. Didn't really eat fast food. I had worked in a restaurant previously to working at the hospital in while I was in college and graduate school. And so I thought I was eating healthy for the most part.
Okay. Was this when you were a vegetarian?
I was a vegetarian when I was 10. I started being a vegetarian when I was 10.
Oh, when you were little.
When I was young, yes. And I think I just didn't really understand health at that point. And I was a vegetarian until I was about 20, 21.
Over a decade.
Yeah, I would eat chicken and fish here and there, and then I would completely go off of meat. And then I was vegan for part of that time.
Okay.
And then I did eventually start eating meat because I just craved it. My body just absolutely craved it.
Isn't that interesting?
But I didn't start out with grass-fed steaks. It was like, okay, I'm just going to eat a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
And then, I did work at a really nice steakhouse.
There you go.
And I was a vegetarian for a good year, I think, when I was...
when you finally gave in.
Started, working there, and then finally gave in. And so...
Can I just say that that's the same story for me, that I was vegetarian. It was very easy for me to be vegetarian. Okay. And then I suddenly started craving burgers. And I was like, what is this about?
Yeah, it was odd.
I had never craved meat. And I thought, okay, this definitely, my body is saying something because I was a healthy vegetarian. I ate a lot of greens, a lot of plant-based proteins. Like I wasn't a junk food vegetarian. So
yeah, I thought same. But I ate a lot of grains, rice and pasta and whole wheat. I thought the whole wheat was fine, and I was a healthy vegetarian. Fast forward, I start working in the hospital. My husband and I had been married for a couple years at that point. Had never, I had stopped taking birth control because I had been on birth control from the time I was 16, on and off until I was about 22.
Wow,
22,
okay.
23.
So 6-7 years-ish. Wow.
Yeah, and so I went off of birth control. We had, and then we were married, and I was working at the hospital, and gosh, I just started noticing I had always had really horrible cycles.
I was going to ask you that, especially because you were
Horrible.
vegetarian from age 10 on. Okay, so your cycles were bad.
Yeah, my cycles were really bad. I was diagnosed with severe dysmenorrhea when I was 16.
What's dysmenorrhea?
So essentially, I mean, it is where you just have really painful, heavy periods.
Okay.
It's just
It's just like kind of a vague diagnosis. That's what it sounds like.
Basically, they just said, I just needed hormone balancing. That's why I was put on the birth control.
Interesting. Okay.
And I still had, painful periods, but at least they were semi-regular.
So that's what the birth control did. It regulated it.
Yeah,
okay.
it did regulate. And I didn't really understand all of that then. But when I started realizing, okay, I'm not getting pregnant. I've been off birth control for years. My husband and I are married. It took us 6 years before we eventually did get pregnant.
Wow. Okay.
But what started me on that health journey was I had cyst bursts. And I had such painful periods. And they were watching this one particular cyst because I was starting to have bladder pressure and pain. And it wasn't a UTI, it wasn't anything like that. And so my gynecologist went and had done an ultrasound and said, okay, you have a cyst. And then they looked and saw a fibroid in my uterus. And finally, I think after 4 months of watching, it was just it was doing nothing, and I was still in a lot of pain.
Is a fibroid and a cyst different?
They are. A
fibroid
cyst is like a fluid-filled
filled
sac, and so it was filled with blood. So it's
Okay.
technically an endometrioma.
Okay.
So it was filled with blood, and then I also had a fibroid in my uterus.
And a
which they
fibroid is more
couldn't-
like a mass, right? Like
Yeah.
of skin. And okay.
So they couldn't do anything about that. They had told me, we'll go in and do surgery, basically just to check to see what's going on and get rid of this cyst. Well, when my surgeon went in to check everything out and to take out the cyst, they also found like massive amounts of endometriosis, which kind of explained the pain.
Which are all the cysts.
So
Yeah.
no, it's tissue. Like it's tissue that just starts growing endometrial cells that start growing and then surrounding
Oh, because
like
that's
my
different
bladder
than
and
polycystic ovarian syndrome. Those are cysts,
Yeah.
and endometriosis is excessive tissue growth.
tissue.
Whoa.
Yeah,
okay.
so I had all of it. I had cysts, I had fibroids, and I had endometriosis. Horrible, painful periods, like iron depletion because I was losing so much blood every month. I mean, it was absolutely horrible.
So I have cut most supplements out of my life. I'm not saying that I won't be taking more supplements in the future, but right now, for where I'm at in my life, I'm really not taking that many. But one supplement that has come in clutch for me so many times, I use it pretty much every single day, is magnesium. Now, I don't just use any magnesium. I've also talked about this before, but I use the Bioptimizer's magnesium. And the reason why I love it so much is because there are 7 different types of magnesium in this one magnesium pill. And the reason that that is so awesome is because the body uses different types of magnesium for different things. So sometimes if you're taking a magnesium supplement that only has one type of magnesium, it may not be able to help you with the other things that magnesium typically can help with if you were using the right type. So by having 7 different kinds, you are expanding your body's capabilities to use the magnesium in different ways to help your body. So for me, in my last pregnancy, you guys know I was really sick. That really stunk, and magnesium was not the answer for that. But magnesium for me was the answer for restless leg syndrome. I struggled with that in my first pregnancy, and I was not taking the Bioptimizer's magnesium, and it was really hard to keep under control. It was almost a little excruciating and like kind of drove me crazy. But in my last pregnancy, as long as I stayed up regularly on taking my Bioptimizer's magnesium, I had 0 restless leg syndrome. And sometimes I would forget to take it and I would start to feel it and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I haven't taken my magnesium. I would go and take it, and within like minutes, my legs would relax, which is like an answer to prayers. You know this if you've struggled with that. Magnesium is great for so many different things in the body. Like I said, and I just highly recommend them. Side note, it's not like a kid's product, but we use a miniature scoop, like a fourth of the regular serving at night for Logan sometimes. They're a sleep breakthrough product, and Logan loves it. It helps him have a deep, restful sleep. I think he legitimately has noticed a difference. He also really likes the taste because he asks for it at night. So I just love their products. Bioptimizers tests their products extensively, so they're very like science and research backed. I think you're going to love their products as much as I have. So back into the interview.
Like doubled over in pain every single month, bleeding for 10 days.
Oh my gosh.
It was horrible. I cannot, I mean, and I've been free from all of that for a good, gosh, what am I? Yeah, like 16 years now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay, so all right, so they go in, they open you up, they find all this,
They find all this stuff. They cauterize the endometriosis. They take out the cyst.
Okay.
It was a pretty big cyst. And then they just left the fibroid because there was nothing they could do. I mean, they would have had to cut open my uterus because it was in my uterus.
Okay.
And so I knew that going in, and I just thought, okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess it's just going to grow, and who knows what's going to happen. So coming out of surgery, I'd actually worked at the hospital that day that I went and had surgery. I worked a half day, and I walked myself over to the surgical center, had surgery. My husband was picking me up that night after I was done with surgery and out. And I remember being so groggy coming out of the anesthesia, and my surgeon came in, and again, I was still pretty out of it. And she came in and said, well, you have, this endometriosis. You have what likely caused it is estrogen dominance. That was the first time I'd ever heard that. Okay. Nobody had ever talked to me about that. I didn't even know where to begin researching.
Interesting.
Prior to that, because nobody had told me any of this when I was deciding on surgery too. And so she told me all this while I'm under, and she said, well, we can put you on a couple medications. You can either go on Lupron, which is a medication that prevents you from ovulating, meaning that you're not going to develop, hopefully, like an ovarian cyst.
Because you need enough estrogen to ovulate.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And then or she said I could go back on birth control. That was an absolute no. I mean, that was horrible. I gained weight. I was moody. It was just absolutely horrible.
Well, and at this point you were wanting to get pregnant.
Yes, and I was wanting to have a baby at some point. Or she said, or you can get pregnant.
Oh,
and well,
my
at this
gosh.
point, I just went, okay, well, we haven't gotten pregnant. And this was 26. So we had been married a little over, I think, 2 years.
Okay.
Just over 2 years.
Okay.
And so I said, I'm probably not healthy enough to get pregnant. I'm just not. I'm not going to get pregnant. And I went home that night in still severe pain and, had all this stuff done. And I thought all these symptoms would go away too. After that was the biggest thing too, is I was still having these symptoms, like something was sitting on my bladder.
Whoa.
And didn't know exactly what it was. I went home, I started researching estrogen dominance, and the first things that came up were gluten and dairy. I'd never heard of celiac before. I'd never thought that this would be an issue. And basically that's kind of what started it, was I'm not going to go on these medications. I'm not going to take your advice that I go on all these medications.
Thank you, but no thank you.
At 26 years old, this is my diagnosis for life. I absolutely was just not going to accept that.
Yeah.
So within a week, I had cut out all gluten, all dairy.
Whoa.
Just went, and I'm black and white.
Yeah.
You kind of know that about me. But I'm pretty black and white in certain things. And I went through my entire house, and I got rid of all of our food, like all of our food that had gluten and dairy in it. Those were the two things I at least knew to start with.
Yeah.
And then I started reading about, endocrine disruptors. So any like shampoos, conditioner, perfume, makeup, lotion, like candles. I mean, all this stuff. And I threw everything out.
Wow.
And so that's
amazing.
That's why I had to start making all of my own products.
Oh, okay.
Because I couldn't buy anything.
Yeah.
There was really not a whole lot out at the time. And this was, 16 years ago.
So that's what kicked you onto this, which, by the way, we won't divert too much, but she has an incredible skincare and body care line. I've only tried a couple of the products, but the products that I've tried have been like so good. As you can tell, I mean, like I said, we're not going to go too far off right now, but she's very picky about the stuff that she puts on and in her body. So it's cool to know that like the stuff that you get from her, it's called pure Coeur, because we live in Coeur d'Alene, pure Coeur, but it's like the pure core of the core ingredients. I love that. Yeah. They're all quality ingredients. So I did not know that that's how you started with all of that. I'll link her stuff down below, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that's basically what I had to do, is because there was nothing out there that I could find that was safe once I started learning more about ingredients. And I will say I dove into everything. I cut everything out, and then I was trying to I think get my mindset with, okay, I can eat these foods, and I would write down lists of this is what I can eat and this is what's safe. And so I started there. Okay. And then a couple months into that, even, I mean, I had lost weight. I lost my need for prescription glasses.
What?
Oh yeah.
You didn't have to wear glasses
I didn't have to wear glasses anymore.
That is... That's like next level. That's pretty incredible.
My headaches went away.
Wow.
Just so many different things, which looking back now, it's been a while. It's been 16 years.
Yeah, wow.
Since I started that, but it all went away. And then there were still a few things where I thought, okay, I need to tweak this. I'm still not feeling as good with certain things. And then I did end up taking an allergy test at the time, like a pretty intensive allergy test, and found, additional allergies to things like eggs. And, oh gosh, like just random stuff like turmeric.
That is random.
It is random, but
you still abide by that, huh?
You don't do eggs.
I
don't do eggs. I've tried Reintroducing, and that one I do believe is a very true allergy for me.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so you took this allergy test, found out more things to cut out. Okay, go on. Sorry.
So I started there, and I will say I've come a long way from being super restrictive and very dogmatic. I thought, okay, I can never veer off course. I could never do this, and I think my mindset was just so. It was so black and white.
And you were desperate.
I was desperate. Yeah. But in the end, I mean, I lost a lot of weight, a lot of excess weight, and I was able to have, fairly normal cycles again.
Wow.
And then I discovered Weston Price. And Weston Price, I still credit that it's like bacon and butter got me pregnant. So
that's incredible. So to those of you, I feel like probably you know who Weston Price is if you're watching this, but if you don't, he essentially was a dentist in the early 1900s, like the 20s or something like that, and he went around the world and he was observing different cultures, different groups of people, and seeing like really what their teeth was like, but then he started noticing also their health and the muscle mass of different people groups. And the teeth really is fascinating, how you can get to some of these places and it's like they have perfectly straight teeth with these wide jaws. And so it led him down the path of like, why do some of these people have properly developed jaws and teeth and good muscle mass, and other cultures have type 2 diabetes or whatever. I don't think that was a thing back then, I don't know. But that's Weston A. Price, and he has a book called, well, it wasn't his book, was it?
Nutrition and Physical.
That's right, because Sally, what's her name, wrote the Nourishing Traditions book based off of his work.
Yes, based off of his work.
Okay, so this is a book that gets mentioned a lot in the like crunchy mom sphere for good reason.
Yes.
Okay.
It's focused on just real whole foods, nutrient dense foods. Really not being restrictive, but more so like proper preparation of food.
Yeah, totally.
What did it look like in the beginning? If it's been hybridized, if it's been put in a package, if it's been, essentially messed with too much.
Sprayed with endless pesticides.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Then it's not health promoting.
Yeah.
And so at that point, yes, I discovered Weston Price. I think I gained a few pounds because I did need to gain a little bit of weight to get pregnant at that point. And it was very satisfying getting to eat like cheese and butter and bacon and raw milk. So
you were fine going back on the dairy.
I was fine going back on that dairy because again, it was nutrient dense. It wasn't packaged. It wasn't like homogenized and basically taken out of its whole form and changed into a form that your body can't recognize. Yeah. And so I did. I got pregnant with my first.
How long had you been following the Weston A. Price way of eating before you?
I would say it was probably gosh, I want to say I had done a GAPS diet.
Okay.
I had done AIP, like autoimmune protocol. And then I kind of figured out like certain things on some of those diets were not working for me. But then I found again Weston Price and started kind of figuring out what worked for my body with, again, some true allergies and what I could.
Isn't GAPS very similar to?
GAPS is very restrictive in terms of, it's like a 2-year diet where you're rebuilding your gut. It removes a lot of foods and then you slowly introduce them back in.
You go through different layers or whatever. Okay.
And then what led me to the autoimmune protocol is because I couldn't do certain things on GAPS, like the eggs.
Gotcha.
And so and then I started, again, layers. It was like layers of learning.
Okay.
And then Weston Price was saying, well, it's not the beans that are bad. It's not the, necessarily the wheat that's bad, or this is what's bad. It's how it's prepared. And so, soaking, sprouting, fermenting.
Yeah.
And so I started experimenting with those things, and again, added butter and bacon.
Yeah, butter and bacon,
good
both yummy
fats,
things.
Really good fats. And it was 2013, Christmas of 2013, when I found out a couple days before Christmas that I was pregnant.
Wow.
And I told my husband on Christmas Day that I was pregnant. We were going to have a baby. And at that point, we had been married 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't I guess just to recap, to back up, it wasn't a distinct, like, then I started this and then I got pregnant. It was really a journey of layers, like you said, of trying different things, doing, allergen tests, removing things, and peeling away the layers of unhealth or...
Well, and I will... And I know some people kind of know this too. A couple months before I did get pregnant, I went and saw a Mayan therapist.
What's a Mayan therapist?
So she is a therapist. I found her. She was one of the only people on the West Coast that actually does what she does. But she's a Mayan therapist who teaches you self-fertility massage, which is basically adjusting your uterus to be in the proper position.
Whoa.
I knew at the time I had a tilted uterus. It was kind of that next layer. But what she told me, it was more than the physical work. She said, you need to let go of some of these things emotionally.
Wow.
Like some of this stuff that's holding you back is emotional and spiritual.
Wow.
And she was right. And I think that was the big thing too. It wasn't just me controlling everything and just doing all of the physical things. Because I think so many of us, and me especially, I want to control the controllables. Yes. And kind of fix everything and just give me a list and I will do it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I will research everything and I will do everything to a T.
Yeah.
And so that piece was, I think was a catalyst too, was just really letting go of some thoughts that I had and just kind of working on some of the things in my marriage that needed some work. And just some thought processes that I had. And so I think that's going to be individual for everyone.
Totally.
But that's another layer to healing too. It's not just food.
Well, it's interesting because I think I found that that's actually, maybe this is bad to admit, but that's actually the hardest, most frustrating part, I think, sometimes about healing is I've noticed that it's like, yes, you want to pursue all of these very real, tangible outside factors like food and your environment and all of that. But sometimes it does feel like there's almost like, just like you said, this untangible, something emotional, something spiritual, and it can be hard to even nail that down sometimes, like here's not to make this about me and I'll make it short, but like with my pregnancy being so sick, I am very open. Bauhaus Wife on Instagram? I lovingly call her Gypsy Witch. She's great. She's like a free birth advocate, and she's very exactly like the nickname, like woo, right? She's actually just became an Orthodox Christian recently, but she's very woo woo wee wah, and she really believes that hyperemesis gravidarum is like a self-inflicted emotional mental thing. I know. My immediate reaction is, no, I don't think that's okay. But I'm also not completely closed down. But it's this thing of like, okay, so then what do I do? Like, I don't know. Like, what's that work look like then? What does that mean? And so that can be a hard part in healing. And it's really incredible that you were able to, by the grace of God, hone in on whatever needed to be honed in on and healed. And that it all came together, the physical and the emotional and the spiritual. And You were able to get pregnant.
Yes.
That's crazy. 6 years.
6 years.
What a
Yeah, I was
journey.
just thinking back, we were married in November of 2006, and I found out I was pregnant. No, so it was December 2012. Yeah, so exactly 6 years.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you found out you were pregnant, which this is, I mean, all of this I feel like is just a huge first part of like the whole reason I had wanted to talk to you, right? Was age not being the defining factor.
Yes.
Because that, like I said, especially on the internet, that really can be highlighted as like, not even just especially on the internet. I mean, we know within the medical system, like you're geriatric after, what is it,
35.
35,
So
you're
I've had
geriatric.
3 geriatric pregnancies.
Yeah, so most of your children have been geriatric pregnancies.
Yeah.
So when you found out you were pregnant, did you already know at that point that you were going to home birth?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, so you had already come to this conclusion.
Yes, there was no other option.
Wow, and so you had been working in the hospital for how long at that point?
7 years.
Okay.
7 years.
All right. And so what led you, especially working in the hospital, what led you to the point of deciding to home birth?
Oh gosh. So
Which maybe you should also say, I realize like what you do within the hospital.
So I am a medical social worker in a hospital, and that my role is a little different, I would say, just because I always started off doing multiple areas. But I am a perinatal social worker, which means I work in OB, like labor and delivery, postpartum, pediatrics, and the NICU. So that was that unit and the emergency room for a long time were my areas, as well as critical care. I worked in the ICU. So I worked longer days. Most of my coworkers worked 8-hour days. I worked 12-hour days. So I was given several units that I covered. And because those units were generally higher, like just a higher crisis need.
Okay.
So you did need somebody working who was willing to work those hours. And so I did. I loved it. I still love it. And now I've been out of the emergency department for a couple years now just because of the work hours. But I still cover critical care and perinatal.
Okay.
So I was down in that unit. I actually love that unit.
The perinatal.
A perinatal. I absolutely love working with moms and babies, and just getting to see all that goes on. And I think that the becoming a mother and like going from maidenhood to motherhood, it's just beautiful.
Such a journey.
It is such a journey. And I really do love talking to moms about that. And I feel like giving them confidence and letting them know, babies don't read books, but you were given this baby for a reason, and there is a purpose, and you were the best mom for this child. And so I just saw so much. I saw so much that was absolutely beautiful. And then I just saw so many things that just didn't make sense to me. Like the interventions, and why are we inducing, and why are the C-section rates so high, and why do these babies not look alert?
Interesting.
Why are so many babies now ending up in the NICU? What are they doing within 5 minutes of birth?
Interesting.
Are these things, helpful, or are they harmful?
That is fascinating to me that you noticed a lack of alertness from the babies.
Almost, I would say, well over 95% of the moms that I work with birth, with some sort of intervention.
Yeah. Because I know my midwife and my mom, like they made comments when my babies came out, like, wow, they look so alert. And I'm like, great. What does that mean?
Yes.
So that's fascinating to hear that you see the opposite.
Yep. Yeah, I see the opposite. A lot of women, which again, I'm not a home birther who thinks everybody should home birth.
Yeah.
I think everybody should look into it.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful. I've loved every single one of them, and I made that very intentional choice. But I do think that women need to be where they felt most comfortable, where they feel most comfortable. And if that's in a hospital and you want, to go in and birth naturally, you're going to have a lot more work ahead of you.
Yeah.
Just because you're going into a system that is not their normal.
Yeah.
And so I just knew for me, I didn't want to fight it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have to transfer to a hospital during transition. I wanted to be in my own home.
Yes.
I didn't want all the germs of the hospital. I didn't want the interventions of the hospital.
The germs, yet weirdly sterile. I feel like it's the weirdest combo of both.
It is. It's odd. I'm exposed to pretty much everything, and I have a pretty robust immune system. But yes, it is. It's sterilized, but yes, you are exposed to everything because you're around sick people.
Yes,
So,
and not your I don't know what the microbiome, I don't know what the word would be like. I wanted my babies to come into an environment where like all the bacteria, it's like, it's our bacteria. They're used to it, you know? Okay, so that's, so you knew right away. And, and did all of this come from what you had seen and experienced in the hospital? Did some of it come from research? Was it both?
I think it was both. I read a lot. I think I'd read like Ina May's Guide to Childbirth and a couple, I'd seen like, I can't even remember when The Business of Being Born came out, but I saw that as soon as it came out.
That's a good one. I always tell people that's like the gateway one. Like if you just are thinking about it, start there. And then if you're still interested, we can keep you going. But start there.
And then I did. I read every book I could find. I looked at, like I read the Bradley Method book. And I read all of these books. I had stacks and stacks of books.
Wow. But Christy is an avid reader, by the way, like a very avid reader.
I love reading. I love reading.
So you had read all these books, you had experienced this, and you knew right away that that was what you wanted to do. I don't know, kind of random question. Did your fellow workers, employee, I don't know, did they think you were crazy for this?
They thought I was crazy.
Really? And they let you know?
Crazy. They did let me know. I had many warning talks, which was actually really interesting. So a lot of them are, I would say like some of them, at least the coworkers I had back then, some of them were more naturally minded. Which was great, but a lot of them just said your body needs to prove itself. You know, maybe don't do this for your first baby. And I thought, well, why wouldn't I do it for my first baby? Why would I let myself have a traumatic experience to then go to home birth when I know I want home birth? I was just very adamant that this is where I thought was the safest. It wasn't about I want twinkly lights and
I love my twinkly lights.
I love all that stuff too.
But it's about something deeper.
The aesthetic. It was not about the aesthetic. It wasn't about proving myself or anything.
Yes, when people talk about aesthetic and you're like, it's not about the aesthetic, but at the same time, there is something about a preferred aesthetic that can impact your, like it's weird. It's like not about the aesthetic, but like your environment impacts your state of mind.
Your sense of calm. And that was another thing I've observed in the hospital. I would go in most of the time when I'm talking to moms about any kind of mental health or postpartum depression or anxiety. I'm talking to them postpartum. So after they've had their birth experience, or at least are kind of in the middle of it. And then sometimes though, I will see them prior to, when they're in labor, if they want me to. So if I have a referral and I need to see somebody, and you know the nurse thinks that it would be better for me to see them while they're in labor, if they're not in heavy labor, then I will see them then. And some of the things that I would observe were like skyrocketing blood pressures when certain people would walk in the room.
Whoa.
And you can visibly see it. And I used to see that in the ICU a lot because I do visualization for patients that can't take medication. So they have to go get an MRI or something where they're where they have high anxiety. And so I would do visualization with them, which is essentially just teaching somebody how to daydream. To basically, that's the easiest way I could describe it, which is helping them to kind of calm their body down. But what I had observed was when like a mother or a mother-in-law or a staff member would come in the room, people's blood pressures would rise and they would just get visibly stressed out.
That is phenomenal.
They would stall in labor. Which of course, and then you read all these histories and physicals, they wouldn't allow women to progress, or they'd stay, you know, like there would be a stall or lack of progression, and now we have to go do the C-section. And it's like, you can see the cascade. You can see you drugged the baby, you drugged the mom, you interrupted a natural process, and now she's stressed out and not feeling safe, even if she can't say it.
Or maybe doesn't even know it.
Doesn't even know it. And so, you know, when I talk to postpartum moms, I always say, you know, just kind of notice who gives you energy or who makes you feel safe and calm, and who kind of either sucks that energy out or makes you feel anxious. You know, when you allow people into your postpartum space, because there is a very real thing. So yes, the aesthetic,
there's something to it.
It's more about like, I created my baby in this home. I want to bring my baby into our home where it's you know, my husband and their siblings, or,
Yes.
you know, whatever else, like this is their home.
Where you are essentially comfortable. Yes, because that's such a big part of it.
Yes.
It's interesting hearing you say that people wanted you to prove, like your body to prove
Yes.
itself the first
So
time.
strange.
Yes, so before
Such a
my
strange
mom,
concept.
it is, but before my mom was really sold onto this, because now she's like, holy moly, this is the way to go. Like she's seen me do it twice now, but she had said that to me the first time too. She was like, you know, you could just do the first time, like at least in a birth center, just to like make sure that you can birth okay. And I remember like it, you know, both births, and I think every birth, it takes a lot of strength out of the mother just to make it to the finish line.
Absolutely.
But in some ways, my first was harder in the sense that like, I had a lot of that kind of from people that were like, well, how do you know, like what you're saying, that you're going to be able to do this? And I remember having to just repeat to myself everything that I had learned that I fully believed. And I was like, if I really believe all of this, then that concept doesn't make sense. This idea of testing my body. If I really believe all of this, then I'm not going to have a good result by having to leave my house when I'm halfway through labor, by having to go to a place that I'm not comfortable with people that I may or may not be comfortable with, you know, or if I am comfortable with them, it might be someone else on duty or whatever, you know. I've said this before that when Dan and I had our interview for a birth center when I was pregnant with Logan, one of the biggest things that made me realize like this is not for me was the midwife would not look at Dan the entire time. She didn't look at him at all. And she said to me, oh, we are so flexible, like whatever the mom wants, that's great with us, unless you don't want the vitamin K shot, and then we have to have some serious talks. And I was like, whoa. And for me, it wasn't even necessarily about the vitamin K shot, though we didn't want that. It was this idea of like, well, unless you, and then we have to have serious. It was like, whoa, I did not. So yeah, the vibes, the aesthetic, the comfort level, I truly believe it's downplayed as like this woo-woo-wee-wah thing when it's actually like essential for your body to give birth.
It is.
It's
and,
like,
you know,
this is how it happens.
Yes. And then I'm very practical too, and I like research, and I looked at all the statistics on safety. So my research, which is, again, backed up by research in multiple other countries too, shows that home birth is actually safer.
Isn't that phenomenal?
So it's safer. It has
better outcomes.
It has a better outcome. Yeah. Bonding, breastfeeding. I mean, everything. Yeah. So Dan across the board.
It's fascinating. Dan has a theory about birth. He thinks that like, just like how officers see the worst of things that happen like out on the road, he's like, I think that a lot of these people, besides the fact that maybe in our worldview, the system doesn't actually produce the best outcomes, on top of that, if they're going to see home births, like who's going to see home births gone bad? It's going to be them.
Yes.
So it's like, of course you're going to then have a worldview that like, this is what happens, even if it's like, that's not what's happening with most of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say too, I had seen all that, and I'm very practical, and a lot of home birth transfers were maternal exhaustion.
Interesting.
And again, that
not even an
piece,
emergency.
Like not feeling safe. So for whatever reason, maternal exhaustion, just they either stalled in their labor, because I do believe labor is very mental. It's physical, obviously, no matter how you give birth, but there is a big mental piece there.
Yes.
And so for whatever reason, some births, even though they're planned for home, they don't end up that way. And so the majority of the transfers that I would see were either, you know, midwives maybe overworking the cervix or providing interventions as well at home, or again, mostly maternal exhaustion, not necessarily like an emergency situation involving the baby or the mom.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, that's something that I knew when I was pregnant and I was going towards labor, that like I wanted to labor primarily alone. I didn't want a midwife there for most of it. And because I knew on the flip side instinctively, and I could have been wrong, right? I say all this tentatively. I only have 2 babies, you know, like, Lord, please see my heart. It's not like, you know, I'm very grateful how things turned out, but I can only share my perspective. And from my perspective, I just thought, if I go to a hospital, I am going to have an emergency situation, because it felt like between the way that I carry myself, I'm very dramatic, the way that I labor has turned out to be very dramatic. I thought, I'm gonna fake these people out, and then something, according to what I had read, like in Ida Mae Gaskin's book, something is going to present as an emergency that might not even be an emergency because of how I'm essentially reacting and presenting myself. And so it was really amazing to be able to labor pretty much by myself the whole time until the very end, both times. And while I could be wrong, I am very convinced that that is part of what led to a successful birth, was honoring my own intuition. So I have been on a protein journey for the last couple of years. I have really specifically focused on increasing my protein as I have been trying to increase my muscle mass. Now, obviously, I am lifting weights. I really am doing physical therapy, but in that physical therapy, I'm using weights, I'm using body weight, and I have had the goal ever since my last serious knee injury a couple of years ago to really develop and build muscle. Now, that is, or has been, I don't want to speak negatively over myself, that has historically been very difficult for me to build muscle. And so I've really been trying to tweak all of the pieces in my routine to optimize my body to be able to do that, to build muscle. And one of those pieces for me, like I said, has been increasing my protein. Now, some days it's hard to get in as much protein as I would like to get in. And so I went on the hunt for a good quality protein powder. And in the process, I remembered, because it had been years since I used any protein powder, that most protein powders hurt my stomach. I end up feeling bloated. I have like sharp pains. My digestion is kind of funky. And then I found Equip protein. Now, Equip is amazing because the ingredients are super simple. I don't do well on like a whey protein or a casein protein isolate or pea protein powder now at this point. I know that's totally different, but I don't do well on those protein powders. Like I said, I have side effects, including like severe breakouts that I will get from some of those ingredients. And with Equip, I have none of that. It is complete ease of digestion. Like I said, it's a very simple protein powder. The main protein source is literally just dried beef. You can do the unflavored protein powder from them, which I have a few friends that do that, and they just put fruit in and like a sweetener of their choice, maple syrup, honey, milk, something like that. I know milk's not a sweetener, but when they're building their smoothie. Or I like to pick one of their flavored protein powders. They are sweetened with stevia, so some people don't like stevia. I like it. I think it tastes amazing, like the different flavors that they have. I love doing their chocolate mixed with their peanut butter. So I do like a scoop almost of both. So I'm getting extra protein, and I love that chocolatey peanut butter flavor. I mix it in with some raw milk and some ice. It's absolutely delicious, and it is an easy, pain-free way, nutritious way to up my protein throughout the day without any difficulty. So I love Equip. I'm very grateful for them. If you want to check them out, you can use my code NikkiP for 15% off. Thank you in advance if you do use my code, as always, and let's hop back into the interview. And
Absolutely.
I think every woman is different. Like you said, where do you feel safe? But that is what felt safe to me. Like, leave me alone.
Absolutely.
Stay out of my face. I gotta labor how I'm gonna labor.
Yes,
you know?
don't tell jokes. I don't want
I gotta
lots of
do my
people around.
thing. Yes, and I knew that what I wanted was to be able to be as dramatic as I needed to be without someone else judging that, and not even in like a we're judging you, but like something's wrong, and it's like, no, I know nothing's wrong. This is just how I am. I'm dramatic. You know, just all of it. And so it's that mother's intuition starting before they're even out.
Yes.
It's crazy.
It's preparation. I think it's preparation.
It really is. Okay, so you knew, your coworkers gave you their opinions.
They did. And then I gave birth at home.
And it went well the first time.
Well. I have had, I would say, long labors, prodromal labors with every single one of my babies.
Interesting.
And I just kind of prepared myself for that. Again, mentally.
Yeah.
that was possibly going to be the case. But I had beautiful labors. I'm a redhead. I had no crazy
What does that have to do with
higher risk of hemorrhage and bleeding.
Redheads have a higher risk of hemorrhage?
They do. We have weird genes that make us bleed more.
What? That's crazy.
But I didn't. I had stopped. I'd researched like the whole K2 thing, so I'd started eating more leafy greens and K2 rich foods, and stopped taking cod liver oil about a month before birth.
Wow.
And then my midwife had given me a cinnamon shot, like a double shot of cinnamon.
Wow.
To stop that, and I never had any problems.
Cinnamon, like a shot of cinnamon, not like a shot of cinnamon.
It's like a shot, like a tincture. And so she gave me double the first time, and then every subsequent delivery, that's just kind of been, I would just take that. And my last midwife, which we have the same midwife, for my fifth, because my midwife that I'd had with my first four had retired, and My friend Rebecca, I had interviewed a couple people, and I interviewed with her, and I thought, okay, you're it.
Yeah, no, I know. And I'm like, if I have another baby, I feel like I have to go to Rebecca again, because I had such a crazy pregnancy and a crazy birth. Like she was great. She handled me great.
She's a friend, and I just felt safe with her. And so I told her about the cinnamon. She was so sweet. She made me a cinnamon tincture, because she has an apothecary and does stuff too. And so she had made me a cinnamon tincture. She had never done that before, but she knew that that's what would work for me. Yeah. And so she made that for me, had that available at birth. Wow. And every single one of them, they were all hard and beautiful. And I would do it all over again.
Side note, you birthed all 5 of your babies in that home, huh?
I did.
That's so beautiful.
Same house.
I love that so much. Did you birth them all in the same space?
So no. The first 4 were in our bedroom, and I absolutely needed to be in our bedroom. And with our 5th, I had prodromal labor for about 3 days. Wow. And I had prayed so very specifically. After all of that, I just said, Lord, just please let me labor all night by myself. Wow. And let it be productive labor. And let me please have this baby before all the rest of my kids wake up in the morning. Wow. So I don't have to have... That's incredible. So I don't have to send them away. I want to labor quietly by myself. I didn't wake up my husband. I just labored. And then finally, I think I woke him up when they were about 3 minutes apart. Okay. And said, okay, we're going to actually set it up downstairs this time. Wow. And he said, what are you talking about? Like, why, so this was, I can't even remember, 3, 4 a.m. Okay. Something like that. And then he ended up going back to sleep, because I said, I'm going to get everything out. I had everything out in my buckets and my tubs and stuff upstairs, assuming, again, I would have my 5th baby in our bedroom, like I had all of our other babies. But I just knew I needed to be downstairs away from all the kids, to be in my own space, and to just, have quiet and not have the distraction. Yeah. And I wanted to have this baby before they woke up. And I prayed so very specifically for this birth, how things would go. And I just remember so I finally woke him back up again and said, okay, I think you need to actually call the midwife. Okay. Now, I think I texted her, and I said, you need to call her and let her know what's going on. We're going to have a baby this morning. Wow. And after days of prodromal labor, he thought, are you sure? Yeah, you're positive about this. But we did. We set up the birth tub downstairs, had all of our stuff downstairs, and called the midwife. She came over. I don't get checked, so she didn't check me. She just like, I think, checked with the Doppler, which I do allow during pregnancy or during labor. I'm going to chime in and say I don't get checked either. And I think people should know that that's an option. Yes. I think a lot of women don't know that. They just think, oh, this is part of the process. I didn't want to get checked. I didn't want to know how far along I was. I know that can check with your, that can make your mental process. That was exactly what I thought. Yeah. I was like, if you check me and you're like, well, you're 2 centimeters, then I'm going to be like, what the? I'm going to be so discouraged. You're going to take forever. And the thing is, your cervical change can happen quite rapidly. That. Yeah. Also, side note, I just didn't want any bacteria down there too. Absolutely. I know that they could have gloves and whatever, but I was like, I just don't think there's any reason for you to be up in my vag. And it's painful enough. And to it. Like, let's just keep going till we hit the finish line. I don't need to know how far I am. I'm just going to keep going. My body's going to tell me. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yes. Side note, my mom, when she was in labor in the hospital, they had checked her with my 3rd sister, and they were like, oh, it was that type of answer. Like, you're only 3 centimeters. My mom was like, no way. This baby is coming now. And they were like, no, it's not. My mom's like, I've had 2 other babies. Like, I know this baby's coming. Yes. And it, just like you said, it ended up escalating over the course of like 20 minutes. All of a sudden, everything changed. Wow. And then my sister came out. So just to back to what you said, things can your
change
body knows.
fast.
Your body knows, and I don't think you don't need all those clinical markers to tell you what your body already knows how to do.
No, I'm going to try not to go off on a whole tangent about that as well, but I agree with that. Yeah. So, okay, you don't get checked, but she came over.
She came over. She sat there quietly with her midwife assistant. I had another friend come over this time just to be with our other kids, to make sure my sister was there. She was a birth photographer for a long time, and so she had taken photos of our other kids, and I thought, okay, we're gonna do this one more time. Yeah. And she was there, and then my friend Amy was there. Just somebody that I felt really safe having my kids around, and knew that she would be able to stay there and keep them kind of occupied if they did wake up.
Yeah.
So they were there. They just kind of stayed out of the way. My husband was on the ball next to the water, because I think I finally had gotten in maybe around 5:30.
Okay.
And I just remember laboring and thinking, again, by prayer, I had prayed, like I pray through my entire labor. So that's kind of what helps.
That's what I did this last time.
That just helps.
Yeah.
And so I just prayed, and I remember saying out loud, I'm going to have this baby by 7 a.m. And he was born on the dot at 7 a.m.
Stop it.
On the dot.
Isn't that incredible?
On the dot. And it was just like, okay, God, you do hear me.
Yeah.
You heard every single plea. You knew exactly what I needed, and you knew where I needed to get to emotionally, and again, and spiritually in this labor. And as I was pushing him out, my husband said, "It's a boy." And that's when my other kids woke up.
Wow.
So they were able to come
got
downstairs.
chills.
They were able to come downstairs literally as I pushed him out.
Wow.
So pushed him out, and they were able to participate with everything, like my husband cutting the cord and
my gosh.
see just the whole process. They were there, and
he cut the cord. They saw that happen.
They saw everything happen.
Wow.
And his newborn exam a couple hours later, and yeah, it was absolutely beautiful.
Isn't that incredible? You know, I have this very much, like I hold two beliefs, right? This one idea of like visualization and asking God specifically for what you want. Also while realizing that like people have hopes and prayers all the time that don't pan out the way that they want them to pan out. Well, see my pregnancy for details. You know, like I really didn't like being nauseous. But it is incredible when things do pan out exactly how you had hoped them to be. And in a lot of ways, I mean, side note, that's not a side note, my birth was like that. In a lot of ways, I got exactly what I wanted in my birth. And it was such a trip afterwards to reflect on that and be like, wow, that played, because I wasn't traumatized by my birth with Logan, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted. And I felt kind of bad almost in like getting more specific, because in a lot of ways, a lot of people would look at my birth with him and say that I had like a dream birth, because it really, in theory, it wasn't that long. It was 10 hours. I had no tearing, no hemorrhaging. He was fine. So if you just give kind of an across the board thing, it's like, well, that sounds great. Yeah. But my experience of it was absolutely terrifying. It was very stressful. And I just thought, I don't want to live in 10 hours of just complete fear this time. And so I had very specific, like, I want to be much more relaxed. I wanted Dan to be awake because I didn't wake him up with Logan, and I did not like going through it alone. I wanted him to be awake. I also didn't know that they could help if you needed help with the hip pushing thing. All the things. I didn't want it to be the middle of the night. I was like, I want to give birth either at night when we would be awake or in the morning. I don't want it to, I don't want to labor all night. Like, I just don't want that. And so I got specifically, the turkeys go running by. Sorry, I still get distracted by the wildlife that show up in front of our house. And my point being is, it is truly like magical when you encounter those things in life that are not only so huge, but they're like exactly what you wanted and hoped for and prayed for.
Yes, prayed very specifically for. I would say my last two, I prayed through all of my births and prayed throughout my pregnancies, of course. But I will say I asked very specific things with my last two, and God...
In both of them?
In both of them.
Wow.
And God was, I mean, to the detail.
Wow.
Like, to the detail. Just so many details where it was just very evident, like, I'm going to answer this prayer for you in the way that you asked.
That's so beautiful. And that's such an encouragement to just, you know, sometimes I think when you don't get answered prayers for things, it can discourage you from asking, but it's a reminder again to like have a spirit of both, of telling the Lord what you want. And he knows, but like sharing your heart, opening your heart and asking for it. And then simultaneously being okay with like, but if this isn't what you have, Lord, you know, help me to feel your peace and your presence, and shape my heart to be open and accepting towards what you have for me. But this is what I want, Lord. And it's hard to live in the space of both. But that's so encouraging to hear that you got that. That's so beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, so you have these 5 babies. Obviously, they didn't all come at once. It came over the course of time, over, what was 10 years?
10 years. Yes.
5 babies in 10 years.
So I had my first baby at 31 and I had my 5th baby at 41.
I just love that so much. And all of them at home.
Yes, all of them at home.
And 3 out of the 5 geriatric,
Yes.
but you still did it at home.
Yes, I
love
did.
that so much. So obviously once baby number 1 gets here, now we're going to dip into, I was going to say the more controversial parts,
okay.
but it's all probably, honestly. Diet's controversial, birth is, it's all controversial.
I feel like it's the way that human beings throughout history have lived.
Well, exactly.
You
I'm
know?
in that camp with you. But a lot of people get angry. That being said, we don't need to preface it that way, whatever.
Okay.
You have a baby, and then it's time to start making some decisions.
Yes.
And the decision I'm specifically referring to is, obviously you were, oh my gosh, huge parades of turkeys.
Yes, they are.
I love it.
Everywhere.
Sorry, I'm still such a Southern Californian too, so this is really like awe-inspiring to me. Yes, okay, so you obviously are working in the hospital. Mm-hmm. You've been working in there for a couple years.
Quite a few, yes. So I'm trying to think, 2007.
Okay.
2007,
okay.
yes.
So what led you to your decision to not?
Oh gosh, so I already knew that I didn't want to, I would say, before we ever got married.
Oh, wow, okay.
I mean, it was, we are gonna home birth, we are going to homeschool, and we are not going to vaccinate.
Wow. Okay.
I already knew that. And I had read, gosh, again, anything I could get my hands on. Dissolving Illusions. I mean, that was probably one of my first.
Any books you have to spit out, feel free to spit them out.
Anything. I just read everything. But I would say, too, being in the hospital, I definitely had that viewpoint pushed on me.
Okay.
But again, what I saw was these babies are not alert, or they're stopping breathing within 5 minutes. And what do we do after 5 minutes? We give the vitamin K shot, and we give Hep B.
Oh, you mean from birth? Gotcha.
From birth.
Okay, yeah.
Within 5 minutes, like, they've changed their tone, but they've already been... again, medicated. If a mom's having medication during delivery, fentanyl's in, most epidurals.
Yeah.
I feel like that's more widely known now.
But I don't think a lot of women know that.
I don't think a lot of women know that's in that cocktail.
Yeah.
And, it's in pretty high doses. So these babies come out not super alert anyway, and you can kind of say, well, it's just this and not the... But I'd also seen, just being an emergency room social worker, I had been the one going down to the ER when we had SIDS deaths. And they most often, I'm a researcher, and so when I had looked at the data and just kind of seeing, okay, what are the demographics, it was like at 4 and 6 months right after a well visit.
Wow.
And so that piece kind of like stuck with me. And then again in the NICU, seeing what I saw in the NICU.
Wow.
And in postpartum. I had people around me with vaccine injuries, and so I really paid attention. So I kind of knew that was not going to be there. And then I'd actually done a pilot program in one of our clinics for having a social worker in our outpatient clinics, just looking at some different data there. Again, more research, but conducting research and kind of following that data on. Again, like how to keep people out of the hospital. Is like clinic social worker helpful? Like, can we kind of mitigate some of these things and keep people out of the hospital? Well, and working in that clinic, they also did a pediatric clinic, and we're giving back.
Okay.
And I started asking questions too, because every Monday morning we would have these meetings, and they would talk about, again, like schedules and just education pieces. And I thought, absolutely not. After all that I had looked into and what I knew, and then seeing this, and then seeing like, okay, we have a separate Medicaid fridge from these other vaccines. What's the difference in the vaccines? Are some safer than others? Do some have different preservatives?
Yeah, and what is the difference?
Basically, you have like your lot numbers. Of course, I feel like most people know that, like you have different lot numbers, and that's how you could tell if there was an injury from a specific lot that maybe went bad or whatnot. But really, it's for billing. I think a lot of it has to do with billing. Like Medicaid patients typically don't always. Whatever it is, it's billed differently for Medicaid versus private insurance.
And I think you said this on a post that I had on Instagram the other day, that you have seen blatant injuries at work, but then they never filed VAERS reports.
They never file for VAERS reports. And you'll look in the history and physicals, and very, very rarely will a doctor come right out and say this happened right after a, but sometimes they will. But even just, again, after reading histories and physicals for 17 years, you can read between the lines. And you can see this is when this was given, this particular product was given, this pharmaceutical product was given, and this is when this particular random reaction happened, and now we don't know what caused it.
And they won't say that this happened after, because otherwise that's kind of like admitting correlation to it.
They do. Guillain-Barré, and I ask questions when I go in and do an assessment with a patient. It's okay, like, you tell me what happened. Why did you end up here in the hospital? Or can you tell me this? And then I'm hearing patients' stories, which is not always reflected on their clinical data.
Okay.
And so I can see that. And then you can see this, again, progression of disease. I have friends who work in hospice, and they're saying too, we've seen a huge uptick.
Whoa.
I have, again, friends that are midwives in the hospital system are saying we are seeing a huge uptick in miscarriages. And I would see, moms come in preterm labor right after they got specific shots. And that was like clockwork. So you can see it again, after we had our flu clinic, most of my coworkers would call out sick. And
you mean after their
yes.
Yeah. All right. So if you follow me on Instagram, although on here too, everywhere kind of, I have shared my obsession with frownies. I love frownies. If you don't know what they are, I'll insert images right here, but they're essentially facial patches that help to freeze your forehead muscles and other facial muscles, but I use it primarily on my forehead. It helps to smooth out the muscles and freeze the forehead muscles so that they don't contract while you're sleeping. And by training your muscles to relax, they literally are like magic, and they smooth out your lines. Now, people have asked me if it's permanent. It is not permanent, but the more regularly that you wear frownies, the results literally last longer and longer throughout the day. I think that their products are incredible. I have been purchasing frownies now for the last couple of years. I will never go back to Botox for a lot of different reasons, and I'm just obsessed with them. They genuinely work. And when you look at women who have been using them for a long period of time, you really see a difference. You are preventing, specifically for me, those really deep 11s from getting a chance to really fold in without, if you're not fighting back, they just fold. But by smoothing them out, I really do believe that you are slowing down the deepening process of those 11 lines. And that's really I get lines across too, but the 11 lines are the ones that I was the most concerned about, even though concern feels like a strong word, just because I just didn't want them. I don't know. Do I need to give an excuse? I just didn't want them. So I love my frownies. If you want to check them out, which I highly recommend you do, you can feel free to use my discount code NikkiP for 10% off your purchase. You can use it as many times as you like, and I really appreciate it. Thank you in advance. And let's hop back into the interview. Okay, so, maybe this is jumping to a different spot. I don't know. You tell me.
That's okay.
But what would you say, because a response that I get a few responses from people that have pushbacks to this thought in general of possibly causing unintended consequences. What would you say to the resurgence of we're going to have a resurgence of measles or mumps or polio? Okay. I think I kind of already, what would you say to that?
Somebody says, but what about polio? I know they have never truly looked at any research. That is just a dead giveaway, because a lot of polio was not actually polio. In fact, a lot of it was linked to, DDT and spraying of pesticides.
I always forget about DDT,
there were a lot of other things going on in the country at that time. There's Forrest Mulready has the best book, The Moth and the Iron Lung, on the polio epidemic. Very well written, very well researched. That's just one book. But if you actually look at the polio epidemic, there's a lot of different stuff out there that would suggest that, polio was again on the decline before the was widely available. And there's polio-like illnesses now that come from a polio.
That's what I've heard, that when people are testing positive.
They're the exact same. They are just renamed. But when you think of resurgences of measles are actually protective against cancer. And I think there are a lot
I did not know that.
Yes. In fact, I can't remember if it was the Mayo Clinic. It might be the Mayo Clinic. One of the larger medical clinics in the country is doing research on that like wild measles actually helping prevent cancer or treat cancer. And so we know some of these childhood diseases are meant to be protective to the body because they give them just added immunity to other things later in life. They are mild diseases, and then you look at the actual risk of measles versus the risk of the measles, the MMR. The risk of the MMR has much higher risk than the risk of measles. And so when you're looking at it for encephalitis, they're looking, the brain swelling with measles, when again, the side effect of MMR is brain swelling, is encephalitis, and that's one of the highest ones correlated to SIDS.
Wow, or as some people call it, VIDS.
I call it VIDS, yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, but something like chickenpox, for example, I don't even think they vaccinate for it like in England.
They don't. So over in the UK, they don't at all for chickenpox. It's just known to run its course. People don't get freaked out about it. But here, I think it's something, again, I think we have tried to control. We have tried to control all these other things.
Yes.
And then, in fact, now we've created other issues.
Yes.
Metabolic issues, diabetes, like autoimmune issues.
I mean, dude, it seems like
allergies,
everybody has cancer.
everything. Yeah.
It feels like everybody is
Childhood
getting
cancers.
cancer.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the phrase that I mean, I don't like it, but that's my favorite phrase, is unintended consequences. Yes, maybe there are, if we wanted to get conspiratorial, maybe there are people at the top that are trying to cause havoc, but I think most people in the system or who have been involved in it, they have good intentions, and these are unintended consequences that come from, I mean, if you want to word it this way, like meddling with nature, meddling with the system that God put in place for our bodies to like take care of these things naturally.
Absolutely.
I don't know. It's interesting though, because I get a lot of moms who will tell me that they're afraid of not only just not in general, they're afraid of people's judgment. They're afraid of their pediatrician's judgment. I don't know how comfortable you are addressing like what you think of that, what moms should do in regards to that.
So I will always say, if you can always choose to vaccinate later, but you can never choose to not vaccinate after you vaccinate. So if there is even an inkling of, I don't think I should do this, or I don't think I should do this right now. Other countries don't till like children are 2 years old. Or
I didn't know that.
They don't do as many. We know that children actually don't produce any of their own antibodies till after year 1, and vaccines do absolutely no good. There is no actual protection. No, there is none.
I don't even understand what you're saying.
They don't produce their own antibodies to it.
So I know they're getting antibodies from breast milk, but I guess I'm not smart enough to know what you mean by that statement.
Essentially, that first year is getting people used to going into the pediatrician.
Okay. So you mean when they're injected with it, by antibodies, it would be their body having a reaction.
That's why they're continually they don't build an immunity to what they're being vaccinated against.
Okay.
So they actually don't have any immunity. That's why they're going back for multiple boosters several times that first year and after.
Oh, I did not know
So it doesn't last, versus natural immunity lasts for forever.
So the reaction that some of these kids are having, these babies are having to, in theory, it's not an autoimmune response because they don't have the immune system yet. It's the reaction.
It's the adjuvants, and it's, it's
potentially the mercury, who knows?
Who knows?
Wow, okay. All right, so you can always vaccinate later.
You can always. I think that the scared of what people will think, I will tell you there are a lot more of us than people think. And the only
especially
reason,
now.
Yes, a lot. I will say, once you start being vocal and confident in your choices, there you will find your people.
Yes.
You will find that there are others around you, even if they never say things publicly, because you have given them confidence to. They may, or they may even talk to you. But there are a lot more of us than you think. And more than that, again, if you are going to be friends with somebody who will judge you on not giving, I think they're poison. I mean, if you want to poison your children, I don't think, I mean, that's a kind of controversial statement, but that's exactly what it is. And I don't think everyone thinks that, but I certainly do. And if somebody is going to judge me for not wanting to give my child that with the known side effects, again, the known effects of having them naturally occur, having them naturally come down with an illness that has much lower risk. I'm sorry. I'm okay with not being friends with that person. That's fine. The pediatrician thing, I have to remind people often, they work for you. They absolutely work for you. I do not have white coat syndrome. I have almost the opposite of white coat syndrome.
You're so lucky. That's amazing.
I work with a lot of physicians. I work with some great physicians, and I work with some physicians I think they just don't know. This is just, I ask, do you know anything about epigenetics? They blank look.
Well, and didn't you mention that they only study
half a day?
Half a day. It's amazing
because
the things
medical school and nursing programs across the country. It's amazing. Half a day of education and it goes over the schedule. I don't even know if VAERS is mentioned. I hope VAERS is mentioned, but I will tell you, I have worked with physicians and I have mentioned VAERS and they have no clue what I'm talking about.
Which VAERS stands for adverse. Do you remember what the
adverse effects reporting system?
There you go. So it's basically just where people are supposed to, when they have a reaction, they're supposed to report it to their doctor, and then their doctor is supposed to put it in the system.
They're supposed to put it in the system.
But this is what I have heard, that so many people don't actually report it.
They don't report it.
They're afraid to report it, or maybe they're unsure. They don't know how to go about it.
Or they just never connect the dots.
Yeah, that too. Okay, so you have the opposite of white coat syndrome.
Yes.
Would you say, so we'll see if I keep this in. I don't know if you think it's bad for me to admit this on the internet, but I have a few friends from very large families that basically ended up telling me, they're like, you don't even need to see a pediatrician. No. They're like, you could see a nurse practitioner or your chiropractor.
Yes, absolutely.
And so because I do have white coat syndrome, which is also partially why I wanted to birth at home, because I knew that if I was at the hospital and I had doctors telling me something, I just know I lose my backbone entirely. I get nervous. I'm uncomfortable. It's like, whatever you say, even though no, I don't agree with you. I get uncomfortable. It's just something in me kind of melts down. I don't know what it is. So we have chosen, a lot of people have asked me, how have you dealt with that? We haven't. We see a nurse practitioner who is respectful of the fact that we don't. And we see a chiropractor because then we have more, people that are in alignment with our worldview, overseeing our children's health. Is that, would you agree with that?
I would say too, if you need emergency services, you can go to the emergency room or you can go to an urgent care. If you need somebody to check your child's weight, you can do that at home. Height and weight, you can check at home. You can, there's another book, I think it's How to Raise a Healthy Child in Spite of Your Doctor. It's a book from the 70s. It has a whole host of different things on how to treat your child at home. And I think it's just gaining confidence as a parent to listen to your intuition, to really be able to understand, when is my child actually sick? And needing help? Or is this a cold and it will pass? Is this a flu and this will pass? Is this a bruise because they fell on the ice and nothing's broken? I think there is a lot to be said about intuition, and then you can always just follow up, with a nurse practitioner, with a chiropractor. We have both. We don't need well checks unless they're not well. Taking a child into an office with a bunch of sick children, I don't believe is going to promote wellness. And even physicians that I've seen, again, unless you're there for something specific, what they're really doing, again, is checking your child's height and weight. And yes, they're checking for kind of normal things, asking you questions, which again, you can answer. And then they're there to sell you a.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've had so many interactions years ago when I would see doctors more regularly. And there does tend to be this, not amongst all doctors, but there does tend to be this kind of strain of Dr. Google, they don't want you Googling things or researching things.
I've watched doctors Google.
Well, that's amazing to hear. That's incredible and kind of proves exactly the point I was about to make, which is in developing that intuition and that confidence, use your research.
Yes,
like use
absolutely.
the internet, go to books, because
Yes.
I do feel that is part of what strengthens that muscle, is reading stories,
Absolutely.
watching videos of other people's experiences. And then, I mean, dude, I just had this conversation with my mom the other day, and she's a pro, she researches a lot. But even her, she was like, I don't know, I'm getting to the point where this issue wasn't resolving. And I was like, have you gone down the wormhole yet? Like, that's
Yes.
kind of what I refer to, like going down the internet wormhole. And she's like, well, not really, but it just, I'm like, Mom, it's not going away. So now you're looking at antibiotics, but like, go down the wormhole.
Yes.
And she's like, no, you're right. I don't know why it didn't, whatever. God, those turkeys are so cute. They keep coming back in front of the window. So she went down the wormhole, did a bunch of research, and then started applying the things that she had researched, and now she's getting better.
Yeah.
It's like, it's incredible the day and age that we live
Absolutely.
in, how much information is right at our fingertips.
Absolutely.
And yes, there does take a certain level of discernment to know, but I feel like by continuing to research, you also start to gain that discernment. Because you see both sides of an argument. You start to kind of spot out things that are phony, or I don't know.
Well, and I think again too, I look at history and physicals all the time when I'm at work. And
Okay.
so I'm looking and I'm talking to patients. I'm actually talking to them sometimes longer than a physician is.
Interesting.
And so when I look at, they don't know what it was, they don't know what caused this, they don't know how to treat this, we're going to try this with a medication or a surgery or this. They don't actually cure anything.
Yeah.
When you're looking at chronic disease and chronic illness, they don't actually cure anything.
Yeah, no, it's treatment.
They symptom treat.
Yes, yeah.
And so yes, there are absolutely. If I'm in an emergency situation, I'm going to go to the emergency.
Yeah,
room.
exactly.
If I'm hit by a truck, like please take me to the
Yes,
emergency
exactly.
room. There are like very valid reasons for using modern medicine.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But for every little thing, I think it's just not necessary, and I can see, like, again, we're not helping.
Yeah. There's actually problems.
There's
being
problems.
caused. Yeah, a lot of people think, I think, if you're anti or you're against a lot of the modern treatments, quote unquote, for sickness, that it means that you just don't have an appreciation for modern medicine. You think you should, and they're like, oh, don't come to us when you're hurt. It's like, no, dude, my mom I brought her up like 3 times in this interview, but she broke her wrist like 2 years ago. All of us were practically kissing the ground, praising the Lord for the hospital, because her wrist would have been unusable, mangled for life.
Yes, orthopedic surgeons are amazing.
It's incredible, but they were able to completely reset it. There have been times, probably 2 times, maybe 3 times over the course of my adult life, where I had a bacterial issue that would not go under control from natural treatments, and it was agonizing. And I, once again, was practically tears of joy when I got those antibiotics. It's like, thank you. And I am not into antibiotics, but I'm saying there are times where modern medicine, I mean, thank you for the men and women that have trained and can do these things. But once again, that phrase, unintended consequences to things that I think are messing with our body's natural ability to do what God had designed it to do.
Absolutely, because they're designed to heal.
Yeah. Wow. I'm trying to think if I have any other question or any other, I'm like on that. I mean, I think that's kind of it. Is there anything on the top of your head around that, around stuff?
Oh, gosh. I think I'm very confident in my decision. And so I think that's the biggest thing. I think the more you can arm yourself with research, go on PubMed. The research is readily available. Go to, one of my favorite accounts is Just the Inserts. I think she just came out with, her reveal of who she actually is, which I love. But Just the Inserts, it's literally just the government inserts.
Yeah.
And you can, if you actually look at the inserts instead of just a pamphlet that a doctor gives you, it's all right there.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you can make a very informed decision right there. Again, with the manufacturer's insert.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing, I don't see what is so controversial about that. This is exactly what the manufacturer says it will cause.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
That's not even anecdotal. That's not, hey, my neighbor's son had this reaction, or I noticed my child not acting a certain way, or, the scream, the Tdap scream, like,
the Tdap scream,
the encephalitis from the brain.
Oh man!
Like, again, after MMRs, like those I feel like are pretty big ones. Any of them can cause a reaction. Rotavirus is killed by breast milk. I don't know why anybody would give a rotavirus.
Know what rotavirus is?
It's, again, I mean, like your kid's going to get some diarrhea and it's going to smell foul and you're going to have to, you know, keep changing things and wash your hands. But it's killed by breast milk.
Yeah. I mean,
they actually tell you not to stop breastfeeding before you get that for a specific amount of time so it can actually work.
What?
Yes, when breast milk kills it.
Whoa, breast milk, man. It really just helps with so many things.
I know.
Yeah, that's speaking of bodily fluids, I don't know if you agree, but I think one thing when a lot of people point to being like such a big part of eradicating or minimalizing, is that a word? A lot of these viruses, I look at like plumbing being
absolutely.
A huge thing.
Indoor plumbing, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, weren't we like up until, I don't even know, the early 1900s, you'd see pictures in cities of people like going through these muddy streets with like horse poop
sewage,
everywhere and just sewage just everywhere. So it just seems to me that like that deserves a lot of the credit as well. And when people say that they see the elimination of some of these diseases in other countries when they're vaccinated, that's always what I wonder, like, well, do they have good plumbing? Do they have clean water? I heard a nurse once say that she's like, the way you treat, you keep an animal healthy is like you give them enough space between each other, you keep their their poop and their pee clean, get it out, you give them good clean food, good clean water, sunshine, fresh air. She's like, it's the same thing for people.
Absolutely.
I'm like, that totally makes sense.
Again, I feel like it's all out there, and I think if people get past again some of those things, like what will people think and what will my doctor think and what will other people think, you realize like as a parent your job is to protect your child. It's not to make other people happy. And I see regret in people after they have. And, some of them, when they say, I just knew, or I didn't know why I didn't know, I didn't know why I thought this was a bad idea and I did it anyway. Yeah. Those are truly heartbreaking stories. Because there was something, there was just something in them that knew that it was a wrong choice for them, and they did it based on that peer pressure, and now they are the ones suffering the consequence as well as their child, not the doctor, not the friend, not the family member who thinks you should. Yeah. So
I will say also what you said earlier about like making it known. I know that it's scary, especially at first, to talk about this.
Oh, absolutely.
But now I've told my husband before, I'm like, I kind of like saying it in front of people. Like, oh yeah, no, we're not into the, because a lot of times what you'll get now is like, oh yeah, no, the COVID vaccine either. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not into any of them. And then they'll be like, really? But I kind of like saying it with this, like just straight up whatever.
Absolutely.
Because I think it helps to, if we want to use the phrase like the Overton window, it helps to shift people's perspective in terms of what is acceptable and what is allowed to be spoken about. And even if they disagree, I think it signals to them like, oh, this is even a debate? Like, it lets them know, like, yeah, there are people that don't agree with this, and I'm not ashamed to say this, and like, oh no, we aren't into any of those. And it kind of like, it normalizes it. And I know a lot of people who don't like anti-vaxxers don't like that we're normalizing it, but I kind of like doing that, because I think it shakes people's worldview, if that's the phrase we want to use, a little bit, into realizing, oh, this is debated, because they just like straight up said it confidently and not necessarily judgy, but like just matter of fact, like, no, we're not into any of those. No, we don't do it. So I just want to encourage you, like, okay, don't put yourself in an unsafe position, whatever that means, but like, be okay with sharing it. Or if you're not okay with it, just push past anyways and share it with people, because I think that the conversation has to keep happening. And the fact that RFK is potentially going to be
I'm so excited.
I know, it will hopefully, we're all very excited, keep that conversation moving forward, because it's, important almost feels like an understatement at this point. But before we wrap this up, is there anything else you would like to say in general, Christy? Is there anything you'd like to leave everyone with? If not, if that's too profound
I don't know. I feel like there's lots of conversations we could get into, but I don't know. I'm all for having, again, confidence in your choices, whatever those choices are, and knowing why you do or you don't do something. Yeah. Whether that's the food you feed your kids or the activities you allow them to be a part of, or, if you don't, if you home birth or you have a hospital birth or a birth center birth or you know, an unmedicated or medicated birth, like just kind of know your reasons and be confident in them.
Know your reasons. That's good.
Yeah. I think just with anything, it's, again, like, why am I doing this? And being confident in that instead of, well, this is what everyone else is doing, or I felt bullied into this decision. You know, just getting to understand what your intuition actually is. You know, instead of pushing that down, you know, kids have that, I think, very naturally, and then it's kind of pushed out by peer pressure and societal pressure. And so I think just getting to know your voice so you can stand strong on any issue.
Yes.
You know, whether that's your faith or, again, your vaccine stance, or you know, or whether you homeschool or you send your kids to private school or public school or whatever, you know your reasons.
Know your reasons. I think that's a good send off, because I've had a few friends that had said to me, like, wow, it's so cool that you researched the birth thing, because I had 2 kids before I ever even started thinking about this. And so I think that's just a good little cap on everything. Know your reasons. Don't just make your decisions. Like,
don't
look
make it out
into
of
it.
fear either. I don't think you should make any decisions out of fear, but you know, the more you know, the more confidently you can choose, and I think then can defend.
Yes.
Can defend your choice.
And you have to
shouldn't have to.
Yeah. But you have to make the decision anyways. So sometimes I think people want to bury their head in the sand. It's like, leave it to the professionals, or I don't want to think. But it's like, you're going to have to deal with the consequences ultimately, like you said. And that is what's scary in some ways about researching and finding out that maybe you land on the dissident side of things. It's like, oh my gosh.
Always the difference.
Yeah, it's like, dang it.
Voice.
But you will have to deal with the consequences of whatever decision you make. And so it ultimately is better to have done the research and know where you stand. You'll find out if you're wrong, but you have to have the consequences either way, you know? So, man, Christy. I'm sorry, were you going to say something else? You looked like you were about to say something. This was great. I appreciate you so much. I've loved having you in my life, especially now as a mom. You've helped me a lot. You've got a lot of wisdom, and you've grounded me in a lot of decisions. And I really pray that this conversation is a blessing to someone out there watching.
I hope so too.
And I will link Christy's Instagram. Oh, you don't do public Instagram.
So it's fine. You can request to follow.
Yeah, we'll see if she lets you.
Yes, I do have a private Instagram, and then also like our business Instagram too.
Yes, and her business Instagram. That's the thing, is like, yes, that's public. That's the thing. Christy is not like me. She's not trying to like go be a content creator per se, but she creates content. She has a beautiful message to put out into the world, and really I wanted you guys to hear her because she is just an incredible mom, and I think it's important for moms to hear from other moms making these kinds of decisions, you know, in her position in the medical field, all of that. So thank you, Christy.
You're welcome. This was fun.
Yeah, it was. All right, guys, I will, God willing, see you back here very soon. Bye.